We'll denote members present today. Councilmember John Newstead, Vicky Boggio, Maria Mills, and Colby Beckham. Take note of members absent. I see no audience for public comment, so we'll move on to the presentation of the first quarter pension performance presented by Will Harrell and Charles Smith of Robert Harrell, Inc.
All right, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Doing well, sir. How about yourself?
Oh, just fine, just fine. Let me go ahead and share my screen. This should be an uncharacteristically short report. I know I'm guilty of saying that from time to time. Let me see here. All right, we're going to jump right into the market commentary for Q1. After gaining 26% for 2023, the S&P 500 ended the first quarter of 24 up nearly over 10.5%, which was the best first quarter since 2019 and placing the index firmly into bull market territory. Since 1960, the index's average annual performance during an election year has been positive 13 out of 16 times. And for the year, we're up about 12% year to date on that index. As of the end of the quarter, the total return of the S&P 500 was nearly 30% for the trailing one-year period, 11.5% for the last 3 years, and 15% per year for the last 5 years. And of course, that would include COVID in 2020 and the S&P off 18.55% in 2022. After finishing 22 down 13%, which was the worst year for bonds on record, the bond index ended 23 up 5.5%, fell 78 basis points in the first 3 months, and the bond index today is still off 2.2% for 2024, which is indicative of bond investors' lack of faith that interest rates are going to drop soon. March inflation data came in at 3.5, up from 3.1, so our inflation is climbing. Yield on the 10-year Treasury note began the quarter at 3.88%, ended the quarter at 4.20. We're now currently right at 4.4% for the Treasuries. Again, an indication that the bond investors are not convinced that interest rates are going to drop soon. And it's really been a reality check for a lot of bond investors. Higher for longer is sinking in given recent inflation and jobs data. 23 was the first year on record since 1962 that the yield on the 3-month U.S. Treasury was greater than the yield on the 10-year Treasury for an entire calendar year. So we have this inverted yield curve, and the spread between the 2-year and the 10-year yield slightly deepened its inversion to 39 basis points in the first quarter. So we've got some headwinds. We've got rising inflation. Our job numbers have just ticked up. The unemployment rate, this last bullet point, ticked up to, I believe, 3.9% here recently, and as of the end of April. And so you're watching inflation rise a bit. Unemployment is rising a bit. The interest is still rising, and our GDP went from. Let me get this straight. So the third quarter of 23, GDP was 4.9%. The fourth quarter of 23, it dropped to 3.4%, and in the first quarter of 24, it dropped to 1.6%. So we are still in an inflationary environment with slowing growth, which equals stagflation. And of course, as I mentioned, the unemployment rate was 3.8, ticked up to 3.9, about 6.5 million unemployed members of the workforce. Clients fully invested, diversified, and rebalanced diligently. And as a side note, this portfolio will be rebalanced in about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. S&P was up 10.5% for the first quarter, up 30% for the trailing year. Bond index was down 78 basis points for the first quarter and up 1.7% for the trailing year. International stocks were up 6% for the quarter and up 15.9% for the trailing year. Emerging markets were up 2.4% for the quarter and up 8.5% for the trailing year. Tips index was flat for the quarter and basically flat for the trailing year. And then oil closed the quarter at $78 a barrel, up nearly 10% from the end of 23. And I think national gas average right now for a gallon of diesel is $3.90. And gasoline out in California for the summer blend is going to be about $5.60 per gallon. Yes, sir. Let me jump to our quarterly report. F5. Scott's been teaching me all the tricks for presenting. All right, so we'll jump right into the asset allocation as of March 31st. At the end of March, and I'm sure y'all have seen this by now, but we were at $97,292,107.20. Had about $850,000 worth of cash. Charles, do you have that updated balance?
I do, gentlemen.
Actually, yeah, okay, I've got it. Actually,
Yes.
I didn't think I had it that handy, but actually,
Yeah, I've got it. 96,782,765.35. And I believe you see the decrease from 330. I believe that was due to, I think, around $711,000 in outflows. So the portfolio is right about flat, a little, maybe 20 basis points positive since 331.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Next page is a graphic representation of the prior page. You'll notice one new name out of the group, MFS International Equity Fund. They replaced Vanguard International Growth and Value. All right. Asset allocation by asset class, 46% domestic equity, 9% international, 4% real estate, 5% emerging markets, 31% fixed income, which is comprised of several managers, 4% alts, and 1% cash. Unit value schedule starting back in 2011. Let me skip on through here. 2020 is your COVID quarter. 21 up 11%, 22 down 14.7%. And you can really see inflation begin to take off in these CPI numbers, 21 and 22. C23 CPI dropped to 3.34%, but you can see a pretty good tick up actually in inflation. So you're up 13.79% for the year. 331.24, 97,300,000. $819,000 of outflows in the first quarter. So you were up 4.5% net of all fees and flows for the first quarter. CPI, and if you look at the CPI was running pretty hot in the first quarter, 1.71%. If you were to extrapolate out an entire year, that's pushing that about 6.5% rate. So inflation is still pretty sticky. 2.66%. You have an inflation assumption of 3% in your actual. Sorry. Hold on. Sorry about that. I clicked my clicker. You've got a 3% inflation assumption in your actuarial assumptions, and your actual inflation rate that you've experienced has been 2.66%, 4.79%. And a 2.04% net real. Obviously, it's these 2 years where we had good performance, and then the inflation just ate it up. And then, of course, 2022 got exacerbated. So you can see that this 2.4 number, which was closer to 4.5, nearly 5%, at the end of 21 just got absolutely decimated by the high inflation and low performance of 22, and the inflation is still continuing to be pretty sticky, as I mentioned. Also, I'd like to point out that if you go back to 2022, and you can see this infusion of $45 million. It was actually 46, but there were some outflows that netted out to $44.5 million. There's always the question of how has that money done since it was invested? I think Charles has some numbers on that.
I do. Okay. So since I believe it was mid-July of 2022 when we got it. Since then, the cumulative return is 19.65, so we've almost earned 20% on the money. But it's been like 1 3/4 years. So right around the middle of July would be our 2-year mark, and that would bring it, still over 10% annualized. So doing very well.
Great news.
Thank you, Charles. And then the executive summary. Let me see if I can remember how to blow this up a little bit. Aha, yes. Well, I might have blown it up too much. All right, Longview Firefighters total plan at the top of the balanced peer group, 36th, 59th, and 35th. So you see a little bit of trouble with that 2022, but top third on the 5-year and the 1-year looks great. Loomis Sales, large cap growth, 11th, Vanguard 30th, Clearbridge 65th, Fidelity 21st, Hood River 8th, MFS 58th, MFS International 5th, Fidelity Emerging Markets 8th, BlackRock 15th, 33rd for the floating rate. And I won't bore you with my discussion on we're going to have to deal with the floating rate at some point. I say it every quarter. I know I sound like a broken record. Let me blow this up a little bit. Right. Vanguard Large Cap Index 46, Mid Cap 23rd. You see the mid core still. Hold on, let me move this. You can see that 3-year number on the mid core, even in the index fund. That 2022 just hammered index funds, and that's what that leftovers are. Same thing with the small core. Just got, you got no one with their hand on the tiller in an index fund. You are taking full market risk, and when it all really hits the fan, you get just pummeled. And so 2022 was not the place to be. Of course, these are small allocations, but that's what happened there. And then the REIT, 12th, 14th, 40th for Guggenheim, PGIM, the top quartile, JP Morgan, 2nd, 16th, Millennium, 1st, 2nd, and 14th. It's amazing. It's amazing that Millennium's record has been as strong as it is all these years. Blackstone Breads, you can see their performance here. Cohesive Capital, Pimco Bravo, and then Campus Clarion. Charles, do you have any comments on the alts performance?
Yes, the only comment that I have is that they are stale. If you look at Cohesive there, the 31.74 on the 1-year, that was before they adjusted their market value for a cash flow we received. So I noticed that it has been adjusted. I believe we ended up getting their 12/31 statement. So I'm going to adjust that next performance cycle, and it should be a little bit more in line. If you want to get a good idea of what they've done, look at the 5-year, and that's about right. But again, we're just waiting. Whenever we have these stale statements, for instance, if we get a distribution of say 300,000, that market value does not go down by 300,000 until we get another statement. So sometimes they're 6 months old, sometimes they're 3 months old, sometimes I've seen them a year old. But this one, I believe, just updated for 12/31 for Cohesive.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
And all right. And then we've got the rich. Can we blow this up just a little bit? All right. Longview total fund versus your custom benchmark. Of course, the custom benchmark does not have any fees associated with it, no investment related fees. But just going back, we've got a 10-year number here. Of course, the portfolio changed a lot when we were hired in the end of 2017, I believe. So we've got about 6 or 7 years with the fund. So the 10-year number, 4.6 versus 5.4, I wouldn't put too much stock in that because the portfolio changed so much. 6.8 versus 6.3, 9.9 versus 9.1, 2.4, 2.4, 3.5, 3.3, 13.99 versus a 13.75, and 4.5 versus a 4.27. So, pardon me. But so basically, literally almost across the board, other than that 3-year number, the portfolio has beaten its custom benchmark net of all fees for the last 5 years. So the portfolio has done very, very well.
Great job.
Yes, sir. And then page 11 will be my final page of this report. And this is just the rank. And so we drop that performance into a balanced peer group and just give it a thumbnail. Whoops. Sorry. I'm not used to this. When I click, it it goes. So 10 years, 70th, 36th, 44th, 59th. There's that 2-4 and 2-4, 35th, 35th, and 46th. So again, you are the portfolio is that peach dot right here, and the custom benchmark is the black diamond. So there's the 10-year number is under, the 3-year number is right on top, but the rest of them are, again, it's the outperformance that you're seeing here that then shows up in the rankings as well. So, Mr. Chairman, I know that was an awfully short report for me. I tend to go on, but we weren't recommending any changes in the portfolio. The allocation has just been tested in February. We will rebalance the portfolio in a little over 3 weeks back to a zero tolerance. Back, every single investment will get rebalanced back to its target weight to prepare the portfolio for whatever the second half of 2024 brings. I know we have an election coming up. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea just to put eyes on the portfolio in perhaps October. And if it has really gotten out of balance, for lack of a better word, might want to rebalance before that election. I don't know what's going to happen. However, there could be some turbulence, and we'd probably like to just make sure it is properly set up for whatever happens.
Any questions? Just one question, real quick question, Will. On the two passive investments on the small core, mid core, what's your opinion on, are we past the market where staying passive was not the best plan overall, or do we need to consider going active at some point in those categories?
No, we're past all that. We're back to the market where those investments should do just fine. They just got absolutely slapped around in 2022 with that down market.
Very good. Any other questions? If not, thank you. Will, Charles, hope you have a good morning.
Yes, sir. Y'all take care.
All right. All right, move on to action item A, review and motion regarding the recommended trades for the first quarter pension performance presentation, of which there was none. So I'll make a motion to strike action item A.
Second.
Motion and second to strike action item A. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, A is striked. All right, moving on to action item B, a review and motion regarding the reconciliation for the month of April 2024 for Moody checking account, Moody disbursement, and Morgan Stanley Smith Barney Omnibus.
Did we talk about Bryce Giles last month?
I believe we did. Well, would be in the minutes.
And then,
Yeah, we did.
and that Lincoln National check, is that Bryce Giles? Or is that somebody else rolling theirs over?
There was 2 rollovers. I'm not.
Yeah, I bet Lincoln Financial would probably be the rollover.
There's 2 of them.
I move to approve the reconciliations.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the reconciliation for April 2024. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Action item C, a review and motion regarding the internal financial statements for April 2024.
We don't have any valuation yet on the Kyle project.
Last,
That's not, the latest one we had was 12/31, and it did not change.
They kept it at $2 million.
So So what's on there is the most recent one we have.
Okay,
And no update on the return of capital?
What they sent us was 1231, and it was still $2 million.
I mean, they were talking about returning capital, though.
Yeah, no, nothing's been sent to us.
They were
on
saying
the
before second quarter, so, or by end of second quarter, so, okay.
Yeah, no, that's the latest and greatest.
I move to approve the financial statements.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and second to approve action item C, internal financial statements for April 2024. Do we have any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Action item D, review and motion regarding the minutes for the April 2024 meeting.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the minutes of April 2024 meeting. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Action item E, review and motion regarding the expense report for the 2024 Telfra peer review held in Tyler, Texas on May 2nd and 3rd.
I move to approve the expense reports.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve the expense report for the Telfra peer review training in Tyler. Is there any discussion?
You got a little discount on your hotel.
Yeah, they gave us 10% off for being firefighter.
Good.
That's nice.
Oh, yeah, it's a great place. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. We can go ahead and lump F, G, and H together. F being the widow benefit and death benefit for Kimberly Bates, widow of David Bates. G, review and motion regarding the rollover contributions for James P. Jones due to separation. And H being review and motion regarding the rollover contributions of Ricardo Martinez due to separation.
I make a motion to approve all three.
And David Bates was the one that was not well last meeting and ended up passing.
I believe he had just had his heart attack. That's
Yeah,
correct.
he
Yes,
just
ma'am.
had his heart attack. I second, if I haven't seconded.
All right. I have a motion and second to approve action items F, G, and H. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Action item I, review and motion regarding cyberware ransomware insurance proposal. John, I will kind of turn this over to you as you've been diligent in getting these proposals for us.
Yeah, appreciate it. And then, so we originally got the proposal from Gallagher for the cybersecurity insurance proposal. And with that, we wanted to shop around and take a look at some other options to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and getting the best insurance coverage for the department, for the pension fund. So with that, I had an insurance agent, he's may be coming in shortly, but Sean Gorham Welch with Farmers Insurance had him take a look at it, and he shopped it around through different insurance companies. Lloyd's was the only one that would insure. So both of these proposals, the one from Gallagher and the other one from Burns and Wilcox, are both Lloyd's insurance, so the same underwriter for both of them. The difference between them really is, from my understanding, is that this one, the one that from Burns and Wilcox, is more tailored to the needs of the pension fund compared to where the other one was a little more things that we didn't need entirety. So the coverages, the liability coverage for most of the different clauses, insuring clauses, are most of them are about the million point with the deductible around $2,500, and they're as similar as you can make it between the two proposals. Insurance doesn't make it where you can do oranges to oranges, so it's as close as we can get. So the difference in the premium, the insurance coverage from Gallagher was
6783
yeah,
24.
it's making sure it was that. So the cyber liability was $6,783.24, and then the one from Burns and Wilcox was total of $4,090.71. So you're talking about substantial difference, about $2,700 difference between the two, with the similar coverages, so, and the same underwriter. So my recommendation would be to approve the Burns and Wilcox proposal.
I would second that.
All right. Any discussion?
You think that the difference in cost is because the one with the larger premium from Gallagher is providing services that we don't really need?
Some insurance, yeah.
Just more like an overarching coverage
Yes.
as opposed to a tailored plan?
Yeah, so for example, and if Sean was here, he could speak to it a little more, but like, for instance, the mailers, we don't have as many, we don't need as much coverage on the mailers part of it, which is one of the most expensive parts of a cybersecurity policy, is where if you were breached or whatever, you had privacy thing, then you'd have to mail and notify all the people. Well, we have a smaller number of members due to the fact of the nature of the fund compared to other types of companies that would have to notify, thousands and thousands of people. That way it gets more expensive. So those are some of the changes that was made that would fit more along what we need of the pension fund. Now, there may be some other differences. It's hard to line them up. I've tried to line them up and look at them side by side, and they segment them differently and they have different terms for them.
Right.
But, from the best I can tell, it's very similar policy.
Wow.
Any other questions or discussions? If not, I have a motion and a second to approve the Burns and Wilcox proposal for the amount of $4,090.71. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, action item J, review and motion regarding the qualification of a quadro for a pension member. Should be in your left-hand binder there, a copy of that. I've been working with the attorneys in regards to this quadro, and we have finally been able to get the quadro into our standard format. Everything meets our standard format for what has been approved by our legal counsel, and I see no reason why this quadro shouldn't be qualified. So I'll actually make the motion to qualify this quadro for the pension member.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor of approving the quadro for a pension member, action item J, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, that brings us to our discussions of upcoming retirements. I believe we have one member in the fire marshal's office, or a fire investigator that is looking towards the end of the year as a retirement date. I know of another officer beginning of next year. Pam, am I missing anyone? Chief May, I've heard your name come up as a possibility later this year, since you can speak for yourself.
No comment.
No comment. That's fair. That's fair. All right. So that's all I'm aware of at this point. B, we just voted on. All right. Upcoming conferences, 2024 Telfer Annual Conference. It's going to be held in Irving, actually in Las Colinas, October 6th through the 8th of this year. This will be the annual conference that was held down in Corpus Christi last year. If anyone is interested in attending, please get with Pam, and so she can make your reservation and get you enrolled online. And then I believe it's not listed on here. I think the summer conference for Texpers is August. Calendar. I thought I had the dates right here on my phone, but evidently I don't. In August, and I believe those will be in San Antonio. They will have the advanced trustee training for anyone wishing to attend that on Saturday, which is just the second step of the basic trustee that you attended then. All right, anything else on our discussion items? Now that we do have citizens in the crowd.
29th through the 31st of August.
29th through the 31st?
Yeah.
All right. Any comments or questions?
So, been thinking about this and just looking at, I think this is kind of an issue to an extent, is people putting in for promotional processes. And I think they're staying in positions where they can work a lot of overtime to boost their retirement. So, retirement-wise payout is based on what we put in, but I know the overtime counts for that, but the deployments don't count for that.
Yes, sir. It's the 5-year average for both Tier 1 and Tier 2 consecutive years average that goes into their final calculation for both Tier 1 and Tier 2 members. It is typically their last 5 years, but it doesn't necessarily have to be their last 5 years.
Right. So, I guess I'm asking this to lead into this. What's the difference between deployment overtime and overtime for work here that's not included in that 60 months?
The difference in the two, if I recall the discussion from the board, was mainly twofold. One, there was no opportunity to work 14 to 21 days straight in a row overtime at the Longview Fire, at the Longview Fire Department, with 48 hours being the max that you get with the deployment. And then we felt like when the pension was designed to reimburse you for your service to the citizens of Longview, and that when you were deployed on a specialty team, that you were subcontracted out to the state where you were working for basically the state, often not in Longview or the East Texas area even, and that seemed more of a different employment opportunity that the pension didn't feel like was part of your normal duties that we reimbursed you for.
Okay. So I think the promotional opportunities are not done because we have so many that are working overtime, and rumor is, and I haven't looked into this, we got people that are making more money than the fire chief. So they're going to get to retire basically at a fire chief or above salary in a position that they're not even in. Is that the design of what we're supposed to do in the pension instead of what you're actually making in that position and having that opportunity to make that much more money and being able to retire? What's that look like down the road if we have Chief Stillman and we have 5 other people that haven't been a fire chief that are actually probably 2 or 3 ranks lower than a fire chief that are retiring at a higher than a fire chief's salary pay?
They would have to maintain that salary for a 5-year average for that to be an actual possibility, but it is a possibility. actuarially, the amount of overtime that we have to hire is negative towards the pension fund because obviously it does inflate people's salaries. That's unfortunately something that is beyond the pension board's control to control, the amount of overtime that's needed to cover. I know we've been keeping we range between 8 and 15, sometimes 20 vacancies in the fire department.
Right.
And it seems like every time we approach solving the problem, a slew of them.
No, I know, I feel it. I see it, I've been dealing with it for the past 5 years.
And I assure you, it's not a Longview problem alone. That's a problem across the state that people are having. Most fire departments have eliminated deployment overtime out of their pension calculations. There are some fire departments that have eliminated overtime completely out of their calculations, and they go strictly off their base salary.
That was my concern, that's what I was getting back to. So is that, with the questions that we've had recently from some of the council members and the public and all the stuff whenever we got the bond last year, and then if this was to get into that arena, would that bring more heat on us? Why are we not retiring at what our actual salary is when we have, we're not able to use the overtime money from deployment, but we are working here? And I don't know comparatively for the few that are making more than the fire chief, how that compares to the people that are on deployments, what the difference is. So what is too much? Is that good practice on our part moving forward of having several fire chief salaries in the pension or not? Or was it originally set up as to what you make in your rank at that time? And I guess that's my concern.
Yeah.
And then looking at people probably not wanting to promote because they can make their pension better at this position than promoting.
Absolutely. It's something that could be looked at. That would require us to go through a process that would require an actuary to do a study of the effects, which obviously I don't believe there would be any negative effects associated with it. There could be the negative effects unintended of it could hurt your people willing to work overtime if they weren't going to get credit for it. I've seen that administered two ways, where one, and I'm going to use the word tax, and I don't think that's the right word, but I think it's the one that identifies with people. Your contributions are still held out of your overtime, because that is a large source of pension income for us, is what we get out of the overtime budget. And then other departments, like our deployment pay, you don't pay pension contributions on that amount since you don't get to credit it in your fund.
Right. I know the last time I went on one, it did. And then I think soon after my deployment, y'all put a stop to that.
Yeah.
So I guess I feel like we're doing the same thing in a sense with the overtime. It's just my opinion, how I look at it. And then the promotion part of it is my concerns on it. So I'm just.
When you're on deployment, who's paying the deployment salary at that point?
With the state.
The state pays
So
it?
they're
State
covering.
reimburses us.
The
Yeah.
city
We
pays
pay-
it. And
you know,
then,
But,
get
but we
paid
get
for that.
reimbursed by the state. So
Yes.
there's no net cost to that.
Right. It's a wash. But before we stopped it, I think, because I think it was 17 or 18, we stopped the deployment. I had a 2-week deployment that went to the pension, but now I'm not going to benefit from that. I don't think it'll benefit me with my time in. But I think we have guys that are working enough overtime that it kind of looks like it would be the same amount from a deployment. I mean, the monies, I think, would be the same. I get what you're talking about, the opportunity, and the monies actually were being contracted with the state, but it's still overtime money that's going in to boost that retirement part, just like the overtime does.
Is that money from the reimbursement to the state, does that get contributed to the pension?
Not
No.
anymore.
So that's why they're not counting in that way. But if they
Right.
do overtime pay on their working their shift, that does get contributed
Right.
towards that.
Yes.
And so I do think you'll get into a situation, that's an actuarial thing, but where it's going to be net in because it's the same, they're given that higher contribution due to working the overtime pay.
Right. I understand that.
And there's, you could take 5-year promotion and then go demotion, and you'll still find yourself in the same, situation too. So there's ways to move it around to help your retirement pension. And I think to Kobe's point, it helps getting people to willing to want to contribute to the overtime and work in that extra time for it.
I mean,
I will make the comment there, I happen to, the state of Florida, I've met some members there, actually by statute, only allows, I think it's 2 shifts a month to be contributed to the deal towards their final salary. And the biggest problem we've run into is, can we track it? Like when we tried to initially start the process of removing deployment pay, it took about 6 months for payroll to say that they could break it down into a manner that we could track it to actually be accurate in following the standards we set. So sometimes we're limited by that, but that was a state statute. I mean, we could look at options. I've heard of options where they have a set percent. You can make your salary and no more than 10% above what your salary is off there. But that would be something we'd have to look at. It would have to be something that an actuary would have to approve, the board approve, and then ultimately the membership would have to vote on it and approve by at least 50%.
okay. And on overtime, that's not optional. It's either you volunteer to do it or you're being mandatory, because we're one of the departments where that's not an option. You're going to work overtime if your number comes up. So it's
And
not
I think
that
that's
we
my
wouldn't have people working
concern,
overtime.
is that if we're mandating them to work and then we're telling them we're not going to give them any credit for it.
Well, they're getting overtime pay.
Well, would they contribute to that overtime pay? Would they contribute then to the pension
Yeah,
at
it
that
goes
point?
to the pension.
Because you'd have to make it where the same as the deployment pay is not getting contributed to the retirement. You'd have to
Right.
do the same thing on the overtime pay. And the firefighters may prefer that. They may much rather get the full pay on the overtime pay now instead of putting it towards the pension contribution. That would be something that you'd have to do it that way, in my opinion, if you're going to
Well,
not give
my-
them credit.
Could
My
you poll-
concern-
Could you poll the firehouse, a shift, and go, what do y'all think? Do you want retirement taken out of your overtime? Because they're the ones that are going to decide it. They're going to end up voting on it.
Right, and my concern is in the long run, actuarially, if we have, let's say the next 3 years, we end up with, say Stillman retires, he's at whatever his amount is, but we have 8 or 9 more guys, so it looks like 8 fire chiefs retiring. What does that look like in the long run, and we continue that trend?
I think as long as there's still that amount of overtime coming in, it's a wash. It's when it's a cycle of 5 years and then we get back to full staffing and then we're paying an inflated salary for which we're not regularly taking contributions to match that amount of money, that it would become an issue. I mean, ideally, getting back to full staff would be the best thing for the fire department
Right.
and for the pension fund.
No doubt.
In eliminating that, but
But mandatory retirement without getting contribution could cause an issue with retention.
I do hear your question and
Right.
understand what you're saying. I think it's something that we're going to need to discuss as a board, and really, I think the fire department, that discussion would need to happen there, because if we can't get 51% of the members to vote for it, we'd be out the financial cost of the studies and everything involved if we knew it didn't stand a chance of passing.
And I don't know about retention, because nobody advertises when they're trying to recruit, hey, your overtime will boost your retirement. I don't think that's a retention problem. I think it's internally, I see it as people not putting in for promotions, because I can retire at fire chief's pay as a captain and not have to promote anymore and still stay on shift work and all that stuff. And then we have several that can do it at different ranks if they work enough overtime. I'm just looking at the end result. Is that sustainable? Is that good for the fund when this has been, I mean, we've been in this deficit for 5 years pretty much.
Yeah.
And what does that look like actuarially, I guess? And then just in the long run, that's what I'm concerned about.
It's negative, to answer your question, towards the pension fund. Now, is it a huge negative? I don't think if 4 or 5 members reach that it's going to be totally detrimental to the fund, but it is definitely going to have a negative impact. Just like when we hire people that can work 20 years and retire.
Right.
They're not as positive an income as when we hire a 21-year-old that we're going to get 30 years of service out. So some of those things are beyond our control of how those practices go. But I agree with you that it could have a potential negative impact, especially if it was a small window of time that we were reimbursed those contributions, and it makes it look like. But if they have a 5-year average that's above there, and I'm familiar with a lot of the guys that you're talking about, and they live at the fire station. They're there 48 hours and home 24 to get to that number.
Right.
But yeah, if it's something that the membership felt was something that they would be willing to vote for, or 51% of the membership was willing to vote for, it is something there is a process in place to vote on that and go through the process. We would just have to go through the 3 steps required, which one is an actuarial study to say what's the impact of it's going to be. The board would have to vote on it, then we'd have to hold an election.
Sure. Well, thanks for your time.
Oh,
Great
thank you
question.
for your question. Sir?
That's Sean Gorham Welch with
Oh.
insurance, so I'll introduce after the.
All right, very good. All right. Next meeting is June 18th
Hey,
at 8.
Cap, I had a
Oh,
question.
sorry, I
That's
apologize.
no problem. So I was curious, would there be any benefit, or is it even legal possible to move the retirees to every 2-week pay like we are on the fire side? And my thought process was that if we paid them every 2 weeks, then 2 weeks worth of retirement money is staying in the pension fund to hopefully gain money on that. And at the same time, would it possibly reduce the amount of taxes that pension receivee would have to pay because they're not receiving that lump sum all at one time?
I'm a CPA, I can tell you the taxes are gonna be the same.
Okay.
The federal tax withheld, so that's a moot point.
As to the other, is it possible? I believe it could be possible. I'm not familiar of anyone that does that. I think the only cost that I could see is the cost that we pay per retiree through our bank to direct deposit their money. And I would have to do some research, unless Pam knows off the top of her head what that is.
What's the payout right now?
Once a month.
Once a month?
Yeah, first of the month.
Yeah.
But like I said, half that money that we pay them would stay in the fund to hopefully draw that interest increase.
Well, if you're paying once a month, it stays in longer than it would if it's on a bi-weekly schedule. So that would be counter. And I think to the point of the banking fees, I think you'll have a higher cost per the deposits since you're doubling that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right. If no other discussion, the next regular scheduled board meeting is June 18th at 8:30 a.m. If not, motion to adjourn?
Motion, move to approve.
Second?
Second.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Welcome,
You made it.
Kristen.